we are recording. So, as you have questions, please enter those into the chat. If you want the questions to come to me as the moderator, send them to the host. It's listed as Deanna Suchodolski right there. It should be right at the top of your list. And you can send a chat directly to me, or you can put your chat, send your chat to everybody with your question. Just note with your question, if you're sending it just to me, just note that if you want it to be read as a moderated question. We do have some questions that were sent ahead of time that we'll read as moderated questions. And then when we're done with those, we'll go ahead and turn off the recording so you guys can have a two-way conversation. Feel free, of course, to post follow-up questions in the chat as Deanna answers your questions. I'm going to share one more real quick thing, and that is just some behavioral health resources within our district. So should tonight's presentation leave any parent concerned about a child wanting support from the district, please look at the pupil services page on the district website. Every Unionville-Chadds Ford school has multiple mental health professionals available to support families. This is a snapshot of the screen from the link that's listed here. And we will make this presentation and supporting documents available on the Focus website in a few days. It usually takes a couple days to get all the data uploaded. But you can reach out. You can find your school's mental health or behavioral health professionals by going to this page or going to any of your school websites, and you'll be able to find that information. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the microphone here over to Deanna. Thanks so much for giving us your time.
Hi, everybody. Like Betty said, I am a project coordinator for I just call it the Human Trafficking Council. That's a lot of words. And I also work with Me at the Well. And the one thing that those two things have in common is that we support survivors of trafficking. A lot of the things that we are going to talk about today are really critical, but some of it can be heavy. So if you do feel overwhelmed and you want to connect with someone, Unionville has amazing resources, like Betty just said, but we also have other resources in the community. This group is called Because I Love You, and it's parent support groups and also youth support groups. And there's also PAs, Strengthening Families. They have virtual parent cafes. I think the closest one is Doylestown. There isn't one in Chadds Ford, so if somebody wants to grab that and go with it, be our guest. And there is also just contacting your personal healthcare provider and seeking a family or child therapist. So we've covered support. The work that I do has led me towards driving a focus on prevention through education. In this presentation, we're going to explore the role of relationships as a protective factor, healthy and unhealthy. We're going to explore how defining boundaries and redirecting can improve our relationships. And we're going to look at how the principles of what is coercion, what is consent, can empower children and adults alike, and some of the steps we can take to protecting our youth online. So as in my roles, some of what I do requires me to jump into some situations where I have to be trauma responsive and rely on that skill set. Some of what I do requires me to work with FBI Victim Services and Homeland Security, but I am most passionate about prevention because through all of my certifications and trainings and all of the seriously humbling experiences that I've had, what I've learned and what I can attest to is that the most vulnerable population that we need to really look at protecting is our youth. Outside of work, I just realized outside of work, I do enjoy the ventures of being a parent in a blended family. We have five teenagers between us, 4 girls and a boy. With a supportive husband, we tackle Ironman triathlons, backpacking into the Grand Canyon, hiking through Canadian bear country, all of which I can guarantee are way more relaxing than the adventure of parenting teens. So the reason why healthy relationships is such an important topic for me is that the more healthy relationships a child has, the more likely they are to recover from trauma and thrive. Challenges and tragedy are part of life. We can't protect our kids from everything, but we can teach them to have faith in our love for them, in their healthy relationships with others, and in their love for themselves. In Dr. Bruce Perry's research, he shows how healthy relationships are a protective factor for challenges in life. So I mentioned protective factors a couple of times, and I want to talk a little bit about what they are and why should we care. At some point, we ourselves or our loved ones are going to deal with some pretty heavy stuff, from feeling abandonment or betrayal in our friend groups or our children's friend groups to loss of loved ones. Protective factors are the glue or the thread that kind of holds us together when we're going through these challenges. It helps us as individuals and as families to negotiate difficult circumstances. And you can have protective factors at these three levels: the community level, the family unit level, and the individual level. You're probably listing some in your head right now, like, okay, they're great at soccer, amazing in math, their best friend's a sweetheart. All of these things promote well-being and reduce the risk of negative outcomes when things get tough. The one common thread in all of those levels of protective factors is relationships. So I have personally seen where relationships are the life-changing force for people that are going through something really tragic or traumatizing. Being able to recognize and value healthy relationships and being able to identify unhealthy relationships are skills that we can teach that have nothing to do with being good at math or fast on the track. And I chose this photograph because you can't really tell if they are best friends, husband and wife, brother or sister. And the point is that it doesn't matter. A healthy relationship is a healthy relationship. Oops, sorry, Betty. I'll just let you take over from here. Okay, so this might be my favorite slide. If there could ever be a magic formula for relationships in life, this is it, 5 to 1. These are just examples, but 5 to 1 is the thought that as long as there are 5 times as many positive interactions between friends as there are negative ones, the relationship is more likely to be stable, healthy, and happy, long-term or short-term. So this is just reaffirming relationships as a protective factor. Creating and maintaining healthy relationships is empowering to children. They know that somebody will have their back when things can get kind of messy. And it also gives them strength in the integrity of standing firm for their own boundaries. And we'll talk a little bit about boundaries coming up. So we talked a little bit about relationships and healthy relationships. Now we're going to talk about some of the things that are red flags for unhealthy relationships. So some of these seem obvious, unable to talk about difficult topics. So communication is key there, right? There seem to be a lot of misunderstandings that don't get worked out. Disrespect and dishonesty, these seem obvious, right? But it's when they happen over long term where it starts to become toxic. Disrespect includes name calling, breaking boundaries, constantly questioning and criticizing the other person's choices or decisions to tear the other person down. And it eventually does become a form of emotional abuse. But the one that I want to really focus on here is manipulation and the controlling, because manipulation can take many forms. Some people call it mind games, convincing a partner to ignore their own wants and desires, and using guilt to get them to behave in ways that they wouldn't normally behave. The next piece of this that I want to focus on is emotional manipulation. Um, this is really key in recognizing when a relationship is not healthy, and we can talk about ways that we can respond to them. No one is perfect. We're all learning. We make mistakes, but when the behavior becomes repetitive or it's in a pattern, it becomes toxic or abusive. This is the Duluth model power control wheel. It's a common tool used to talk about relationships where power and control dynamics are not healthy, like an intimate partner violence, trafficking, labor trafficking. But these words here are tools that we can use for identifying when a relationship is becoming unhealthy. Yeah, so this is just a great way for us to identify toxic behavior and be clear about what we're willing to put up with. This is also a great place to have tools where we can identify our boundaries. Yes, okay, let's talk about boundaries in the next slide. So in a recent study by Sarah Thomas from Northwestern University, they found that less than 8% of the girls that had shared explicit pictures, this is a group of 500 students between the ages of 12 and 18. And out of that 500, 8% actually shared the explicit pictures because they wanted to. So the rest did so because of a desire to please or avoid conflict. So we know that there is an issue here with not understanding what consent is, or what coercion is. So this is where helping to be very clear about our boundaries is important. It's establishing what you're comfortable with, not comfortable with, identifying your physical personal boundaries and includes absolutely giving consent. Establishing boundaries is deeply personal and different for every family. So my 14-year-old, what my 14-year-old put up with is very different than what my 13-year-old will put up with, even though we live in the same house, same parenting, very different. So it's just a very personal thing, and it's something to just have a conversation about. And next, we're going to talk a little bit about redirecting. So talking about the teens, developmentally, decision-making wise, we know that at this point in their lives, decision-making wise, their prefrontal cortex is basically like a toddler driving a golf cart. We are planting seeds. They might roll their eyes, but they are listening. Our voices do stay in their heads. We just saying these things over and over is reinforcing the message. It's not okay to request naked pictures because then you're putting someone else in a terrible position. It is a behavioral speed bump because they're going to think about it, and it just kind of pauses their behavior. And this helps them to define and fortify the boundaries and normalize awareness in the harm of violating other people's boundaries. Okay, so then this is going to lead right into consent and not consent. So with consent, you know what you're being asked. You're understanding the consequences and you're willing to accept them. You know what your choices are. You're able to make your own choice. You're able to say yes or no. Your response is respected and accepted. Not consent is confusing. Things are a little bit fuzzy. As soon as you feel like you're not sure what the issue is or why you feel the need to respond so quickly, now you're getting into the area of non-consent. So this is where you're being asked to do something that you really don't know what it is that you're being asked to do, or you're being told what to do. You're not really given a choice, or there's an illusion of choice. You're afraid of the consequences, or you're being repeatedly asked to do something until you finally give in. That's not consent. And then next, we're going to go through a video. This video has been around for a little while, and I think it was on the Focus website. So you may all have seen this, but I don't think you can see this enough. Like every time I see it, I catch another nuance of it about consent. So I'll just let Betty take over from here. I'm going to mute myself.
If you're still struggling with consent, just imagine instead of initiating sex, you're making them a cup of tea. You say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? They go, oh my God, I would love a cup of tea. Thank you. Then you know they want a cup of tea. If you say, hey, would you like a cup of tea? And they're like, I'm not really sure. Then you could make them a cup of tea or not, but be aware they might not drink it. And if they don't drink it, then, and this is the important part, don't make them drink it. Just because you made it doesn't mean you are entitled to watch them drink it. And if they say no, thank you, then don't make them tea at all. Just don't make them tea. Don't make them drink tea. Don't get annoyed at them for not wanting tea. They just don't want tea, okay? They might say, yes, please, that's kind of you. And then when the tea arrives, they actually don't want the tea at all. Sure, that's kind of annoying as you've gone to all the effort of making the tea, but they remain under no obligation to drink the tea. They did want tea, now they don't. Some people change their mind in the time that it takes to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk. And it's okay for people to change their mind. And you are still not entitled to watch them drink it. And if they're unconscious, don't make them tea. Unconscious people don't want tea. And they can't answer the question, do you want tea? Because they're unconscious. Okay, maybe they were conscious when you asked them if they wanted tea. And they said yes. But in the time it took you to boil the kettle, brew the tea, and add the milk, they are now unconscious. You should just put the tea down. Make sure the unconscious person is safe. And this is the important part again. Don't make them drink the tea. They said yes then, sure, but unconscious people don't want tea. If someone said yes to tea, started drinking it, and then passed out before they finished it, don't keep on pouring it down their throat. Take the tea away. Make sure they're safe, because unconscious people don't want tea. Trust me on this. If someone said yes to tea around your house last Saturday, that doesn't mean they want you to make them tea all the time. They don't want you to come around to their place unexpectedly and make them tea and force them to drink it, going, but you wanted tea last week. Or to wake up to find you pouring tea down their throat, going, but you wanted tea last night. But if you can understand how completely ludicrous it is to force people to have tea when they don't want tea, and you're able to understand when people don't want tea, then how hard is it to understand it when it comes to sex? Whether it's tea or sex, consent is everything. And on that note, myself a cup of tea.
Thank you, Betty. So just to reaffirm that, have the conversation with yourself. How would you define coercion and consent? What does coercion and consent look like, sound like, feel like? Can you give an example of it? We're going to talk more about coercion in a second, but it's important to have a conversation with yourself and then have it with our kids. The power of consent is that it helps us maintain our sense of integrity and self-worth in a moment, and it helps us to speak up for ourselves and maintain boundaries, of course. So coercion. Coercion, I call it ugly persuasion because it really feels like someone is being ugly when they're pushing you to do something that doesn't feel comfortable. It is someone who is misleading. They're sweet talking you, trying to put one over. It's feeling like you have to sacrifice something that you care about in order to engage, and that's not consent, and that is coercion. So very uncomfortable persuasion or pushy persuasion for our little ones. If you want to have that conversation with them, somebody that's being way too pushy persuasion, it's coercion. Next slide. What coercion feels like? It feels like an upset stomach. It feels like confusion. and avoiding interaction with the coercer, the person that maybe trying to push the person into doing something. It feels like feeling isolated because when you're being coerced, it feels like you're the only person experiencing that. So you do feel a sense of isolation. And it feels like discomfort in trying to tell someone, because a lot of times when you're being coerced, it's to do something that you're not supposed to do, or words are being used that you're not comfortable with. So there's discomfort in trying to talk about it. That's a red flag for coercion. And then what coercion sounds like. And these are going to be very familiar to all of us. Next slide. Coercion sounds like, it's okay, don't worry, just this once, trust me. You know, I wouldn't do anything to hurt you. These sound pretty cheesy and cliche, but they've been used over and over. Everybody is doing it. Yes, that especially when it comes to having electronics, it feels like everybody is doing it, but they're not. So stand strong. Okay. What to say to a respected, caring adult? These are, this is an exercise that you can do. You can give your child these words, print them out, write them on index cards, and tell your child that if they're ever in a situation where something feels off, they can send a text or leave this card for you. You will pick them up, or you'll take them for a ride. No questions asked, and go from there. I need help. Someone has asked me to do something. I don't know what to do. Can you teach me what to say when? That opens up a conversation. Something bad happened. I don't know how to tell you, but I need to, and I'm afraid. Next slide. And then what to say, I say the coercer, but it's the person that's being pushy. No, I don't want to, I'm not going to. I say it to significant other, so it's someone that's in a relationship. I'm worth more than that. If you truly love me, you wouldn't ask me to do that. And then my personal favorite is this last one. I thought you were better than that. And that came from one of the youth that I worked with who provided feedback to this. And I thought that was fantastic. We get fantastic feedback from actual teens that we're working with in these programs and workshops. This is a lot. This is normally a 2-hour workshop. Stay with me. It's a lot, but it's worth it, I promise. Next slide. This is so important. It's okay to hurt someone's feelings when you need to say no. Let's normalize that. Let's normalize that. Let's make that an okay thing for us to make someone else uncomfortable with our no. That can be really tough, especially for our little ones and people in a position of authority. So it's just about determining boundaries and respect, but still being able to say no. Next slide. And this is just a big reminder for our kids and for ourselves. Speak your truth, even if your voice shakes. Let's talk about not shaming or attacking our children or others when they are telling us their truth. Next slide. So who might be a respected, caring adult that your child could talk to? We, of course, always want our children to come talk to us, right? But we have those selected few trusted adults around us that we would call to grab our babies in an emergency. Give your child permission to lean on these selected few trusted people if they feel like for some reason they can't come to you. Give them multiple safety lines. Let's take our ego out of the picture and give them multiple options for having these healthy relationships. Next slide. So I wanted to talk a little bit about why a child might not speak up. This is important. So sometimes a child won't speak out. They won't ask for help, and it might be because they're afraid of being judged. They're afraid that they're going to get in trouble. Of course, that's obvious. But they're also afraid that the person who's doing the coercing or asking them to do something uncomfortable is going to get in trouble, because usually that's a person that they know, respect, or they're friends with. That's a big one. So that absolutely will impact whether they ask for help or whether they tell you about it. They might be embarrassed. They might feel shame about the conversations that are being had. And then it could be cultural. So my family is from Puerto Rico, and we grew up with that concept. We don't air our dirty laundry out there. I realize now that that's kind of toxic, and it's not something we want to keep teaching our children. But it is a norm in many Latin and other cultures. So just allow space and grace for this, and don't take it personal. It's not an insult if your child doesn't want to confide in you. Yeah, it could be any of these things. Next slide. So I want to talk about the role of fear and shame in coercion and grooming because of the way that it impacts our brain. Next slide. So the brain responds to shame the same way it does as fear. It doesn't know the difference. Your body goes into survival mode. And that means, and we've probably all heard this before, fight, flight, freeze. And something else in the trauma response community is fawn. So I had a boss that I worked with when I was younger. He could be a little bit condescending in the way that he spoke, but he also became very passionate and loud, and it got intimidating, and I would start to panic, and I realized that I was holding my breath whenever he would go into this mode of telling us or me what we needed to do, and I would just fawn. I would just be like, yes, yep, that's what we're gonna do. And my limbic brain took over. I didn't feel like I had a choice in the matter. My ability to verbalize gone. And this is in an adult professional situation and environment. So this is happening to adults in a professional environment. Imagine what this is happening, how this is happening for our kids. So next slide. The brain response is automatic. Like you can't control that. When a child does that, or when an adult does that, it's not a choice. But we can help to tame the brain's response, which I'm going to do right now because I'm tell that I'm talking really fast. Just take a breath. The goal is to reactivate the frontal cortex and bring thought and agency back online. It only takes 3 breaths for the vagus nerve to re-engage. And the vagus nerve is the nerve that goes from the brainstem to our organs. If you think about like it regulates mood, being able to sleep, digestion. So as long as this nerve is engaged and functioning, we can think. We don't have to feel like we're going to lose our lunch. And it helps us with decision making. So we can take a deep breath. The second one is creating space between self and threat. So put the phone down, walk away, take a walk. Just creating the space brings safety back to the situation. And then write it out. So writing engages the left and the right brain, brings back your decision-making capabilities again. And what I love about this is that the person doesn't have to send what they're writing. They can throw it away or they can delete whatever they're typing. It's just an exercise for them to kind of get re-engaged with bringing their emotions back online and their decision-making capability. Next slide. So this is a little bit more about fear and shame. So the fear part is feeling out of control. And these words are important. I think as parents, we have to really look at how we're using language and how we are unintentionally shaming our children or even ourselves. If I hear my child saying that so-and-so sent a nude by accident, and I say, oh my gosh, that's gross. I've just shut my child down. I've just created a barrier to them telling me about someone that may need help, or if that was just asking for a friend, right? Don't we all do that? But it's really my child. I've created a barrier for that. So shaming, not only does it affect the way our brain responds, but it can also create a challenge with providing support. So it can be really hard to say what we need, period, especially when we feel shame. Psychologically, shame shuts down our thinking brain, our frontal cortex. It just makes it harder to make decisions. So just being aware of that. Next slide. And then I call this the reality check. It's the ultimate test. This is worth printing out or even sending it in a text message. If you want to say no, but you feel like you can't say no because something bad will happen to someone you care about or to you, then it's time to talk to someone. So in relationships, just because you don't feel like you can say no for any number of reasons, it's not necessarily abuse. Not wanting to hurt someone's feelings doesn't mean you're being abused. But if you want to say no and it won't come out because you're afraid that something bad will happen, it's just time to take a step back from the situation. It's a flag, it's a sign, it's a point of reflection or seeking help from a responsible and caring adult. Next slide. So for the next couple of slides, we're going to talk a little bit about online safety and some of the terms and things that we will see and that our kids are definitely seeing online that we might not know. And I'm only going to go into a little bit of this. We can do a whole workshop on this, but catfishing. Some parents don't know what this is. It's to lure someone in a relationship by means of a fictional online persona. There are some people that do this as a profession. They spend all day looking for vulnerable people to extort or to trick, lure for various reasons. I had a friend who was involved in meeting someone and getting to know someone online. And about 3 months in, she realized that this person had checked all these boxes. They never showed their face. They asked for money. The pictures and images that they did have on their social media were gorgeous. And she eventually did a Google search of the image, and it ended up being a famous person from another country. And they were using all of their family pictures, and it was kind of heartbreaking. So this is something that can happen to adults and happens to children. When it comes to youth, this probably happens more as a prank between friends than as an intentional scam to get money. Next slide. So this is where the catfishing can become predatory behavior. This is 5 ways that online predators can approach victims. And like I said, it says child here, but it really can be anybody. So they might pretend to be another child. They might act slightly older. Geographically specific, they may say, oh my goodness, we should be friends. I'm only 2 towns over. Or I go to this and this high school. Friending friends is probably the most popular. That's the way that I've seen happen the most, where someone infiltrates a friend group and might actually convince one of the friends in the friend group to give them their password and then pretend to be that friend and possibly request inappropriate or exploitive things from that friend group. And the friend group is looking at it and saying, oh my gosh, I can't believe that she's doing this. She would never do this. So have that conversation, let them know that that's possible, that can happen. In that situation, they had enough comfort with each other that they could have the conversation with each other, and also going to the counselor and saying, this is happening, this is weird, not sure, just wanted to share. And it worked out very well. Next slide. I could have spent weekend workshops on this, but it would be irresponsible of me not to mention this. I'm just going to mention this in this one slide because the internet is where relationships happen. The National Human Trafficking Hotline identified 55% of potential victims were recruited through the internet. Our children believe that these people that are recruiting actually want to be in a relationship with them. They believe that this is someone that is going to provide a modeling contract or an acting opportunity. So it's just the awareness is where we have the most power, not being afraid to have a conversation about that. Next slide. these are some of the most popular apps that are used online, not only by our youth, but also by predators. So it's just something to be familiar with. Visco, Omega, CityX Guide, many of these are adult only. If your child has them on their phone, ask questions, better yet, get rid of them. You have to state that you're over 18 to be on most of these. And even though they say social networking, they are known for being used for escort services. And they're not always what they seem. So this calculator app in the middle, the green and yellow one, that one, when you tap on it, it opens up, it looks just like a calculator, but when you put in a specific code, it opens up and gives you access to photographs that someone is trying to hide. So like a camera vault. That one was tricky. Next slide. What you can do. So this is a fantastic website, internetmatters.org. It's free. There are other websites out there that do a great job also, but you do have to pay for the services, so I don't talk about them. We can have a conversation offline. Feel free to email me. My email was on the first slide. But this one does a fantastic job of providing different ways to show you how to set the protections on the different apps. You can go to the website, type in Snapchat, and it'll give you a video tutorial or a PDF or a step-by-step guide for how to put the privacy protections on there. Next slide. So these are like little posters. So this internet safety tips for parents, I can absolutely send that to you. This first one, don't block all access to technology, is very personal. If I knew then what I know now, I would have limited access to online devices for as long as possible. But this is, every family is different, every situation is different. If you do have to share devices with young ones that wouldn't normally have them, have the conversations with them. Have this online safety plan. I have this in a very easy black and white printable format where you can customize it with your child, take things out that don't make sense, put things in that do make sense, make them a part of it so that it's more realistic for them. Whether or not they actually go along with every single one isn't the case. You're planting the seed. You're putting the thought in their head that this is something that's important to you and should be important to them, and hopefully does become important to them. These support lines are also on the focus page. I think we are ready for questions, but I'm going to pause for a second. Maybe we take a breather just for a minute. I'm gonna look at the chat. How's everybody feeling? That was a lot, right?
That's great, Deanna, thanks. We will start going through the questions. There is a question in the chat that I just answered in the chat about making this information available. So I'll just answer that for you while you take a deep breath there, Deanna. Rest your voice for 1 second. So all of Deanna's materials that she's shared with us this evening will be available for everyone on the Focus website. I put a link to the Focus website right in the chat. So it's ucfsd.org/focus. It'll take us a couple of days just because to get everything up there, just because we have to upload the recording of this evening to YouTube, and there's a variety of people involved in helping us with that process. So just give us a couple of days and all the materials will be available. I see a question about a PDF of the images, such as the internet safety plans. Deanna, is that, should we just attach that file as well?
Absolutely.
Make a note here. Okay.
Oh my gosh, Vic brought me a fan because he saw my face getting red.
Well done, Vic. Okay, so I think those are the logistical questions I'm seeing. Okay, so I'm gonna take us through the curated questions that folks have asked ahead of time. And anyone else, feel free to keep adding your questions to the chat, and we'll answer those. We can open up the conversation, the two-way conversation, once we're done with the curated questions.
I do want to mention that the tea video, there is a kids version. You can also trim the beginning and end of the tea video so that it doesn't mention the sex part and it just talks about consent, and that's perfectly fine. And we'll share the link to the kids version also, and it's adorable. It's very sweet.
Okay. Let's see. So here's the first question. That's great. Thank you so much, Deanna. All right. The first question is, what is a good age to start having these conversations on consent and coercion with your children?
I would say as soon as you see them on the playground experiencing it. So as soon as you see them, somebody getting convinced to go run up the slide or run down the slide, right? That's coercion. Like that's pushy persuasion. That's uncomfortable persuasion. Right then and there, you have an opportunity to have that conversation. Hey babe, guess what? When they tell you to do that, you don't have to do that. That's pushy persuasion and it doesn't feel good. You don't have to do that. Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. Great. Okay. So another question here is, can you elaborate more, Deanna, on the response of fawn? And I know this is that struck me when I first heard the presentation as well. Can you talk a little bit more about the response?
Fawn is a little bit newer in the trauma response community. Fawn is basically not being able to say no. Fawn is when consent is gone. Like you're just going to do whatever needs to be done to get out of that situation because it feels so uncomfortable and so awful. Fawn is saying, yes, I can have that to you by midnight tonight, knowing that I have this to do, because the person is being so coercive and pushing in such a way that I feel so uncomfortable about it that I'm just saying, yes, okay, fine. You just give in. That's not really consent. That's fawn. Fawn is you're basically feeling like to survive in that moment, you just have to give in.
Okay.
Betty,
Okay,
we talked about this before. Like we talked about the fawning and how sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing it. Just in the moment, you just want that situation to be over. And you're just like, yes, fine. That's fawn. Fawn is fine, but not fine.
Right, exactly. Okay. Okay, yeah, and I see Brian's comment there. I just Googled fawn, and there's apparently also a flop response to it.
That's true, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so if there are more follow-up questions on fawn, just go ahead and put them in the chat, just to me or to the group. I'm gonna go on to the next question, which is, how do I help my child navigate what I think is an unhealthy relationship while also allowing them autonomy to make their own choices?
So that's tricky because you don't want to tell them what to do. You want to help them just try to figure it out. But behavior that makes us uncomfortable, teach them to ask why. Kids love asking why. Oh my goodness. Did you see the picture of Yoda where he dies from being asked too many questions? Like enable that and engage that, empower that in kids to ask them why. Get them to ask their friend why are they suggesting or coercing or engaging in something that's not safe? Why are they doing this behavior that doesn't feel good? And if the answer that they get doesn't make sense, and it probably won't, tell them to say that. That doesn't make sense. If we go down that path, I'll lose my privileges to this. Or if somebody finds out that you're behaving this way, we're not going to be able to hang out anymore, and that wouldn't be cool. So teach them that if it continues and it's repetitive or becomes aggressive, it's bordering on abusive or toxic, and that's when they can take a step back. And that's where they have the autonomy and the agency to navigate the relationship, because they can recognize that it's becoming repetitive, aggressive, and that it doesn't feel good. And then they have the agency to take a step back.
Okay, thank you. That's good. Here's another question. So what are some ways to respond to my child when they vocalize discomfort with being assertive with setting boundaries?
Practice. So when they push our buttons, you want to not shut them down from that. You want to say, I love that you're standing your ground on this, but your safety comes first. So allowing them to push boundaries, allowing them to have those conversations at home with you, because you're safe and you're not going to yell at them when they push back. You might yell at them, but you're not going to say, you're no longer my child. That's not going to happen. You're a safe place where they can push boundaries and allow it, but also be a parent discipline, of course. Just saying your safety always comes first. But I love that you're standing your ground on this. So giving them those positive affirmations for when they do it. I am definitely not an assertive. Being assertive takes work for me. So I do have to practice, and I do have to think about the fact that I am standing my ground. I am doing self-preservation and self-care. By vocalizing my discomfort and being assertive, I'm putting my oxygen mask on first, so then I can take care of the people around me. That might be a lot for little ones, but for adults that are working through being assertive, it helps.
Okay. Okay. So my child, here's the next question, I think, and I apologize, maybe I mixed up. You didn't just answer the boyfriend-girlfriend question, did you?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I was rearranging things and I know you're answering, I'm just doing my job. All right, so my child has their first boyfriend or girlfriend. What is normal? It feels intense to me.
Oh, that's also one of those things that's really deeply personal and really depends on your family dynamics and values. But I think when our kids first engage in a relationship, it's alarming for us as parents. Any interaction is going to seem intense, but if the intensity starts to look something like the words that you saw on the power and control wheel after maybe a month or two, then having a conversation about those dynamics could be beneficial. That's where, again, where the repetitive or aggressive behavior or the controlling behavior, if you recognize that, just having a conversation so that they recognize it for themselves too. And then, you're teaching them for the long run.
Great, okay. So the next question I have is from the group is, how do I express my concerns to my child about their relationship without them feeling like I'm judging them?
That's so hard, right? Because as soon as we start having that conversation, it sounds like we're judging them. What were you thinking? Coming from a position of love and safety. So we've all been there before. You trust them. You want to tell them that you trust them, but you want them to pay attention to these red flags. You want to plant the seeds to build their awareness. Avoid demands or ultimatums unless safety is an issue. But having the conversation from loving them and wanting them to be safe. So that's where whatever those words are that you would say, to express that you just want them to be safe and that you just have some concerns. And you could be off. You could be way off. But you wouldn't be doing your job if you didn't share that with them, right? Like I wouldn't be doing my job as a parent if I didn't tell you that something makes me feel a little bit off. I could be wrong. Right? And they're like, yeah, mom, you're of course, moms are never wrong.
Right, for sure. So any specific suggestions you would have on how to cope if you think your child is involved in an unhealthy relationship, whether it's a friendship or a romantic relationship?
Magic question. So for parent coping, if you're talking about parent coping, talk to other parents about their perspective or the other parent in the relationship. They may or may not see what you're seeing. They might not see that there's a problem. Ask them to reach out if something comes up and offer the same so that you guys are both on the same page. It's hard because we want to protect our children and we want to keep their pain private and the challenges that they go through as private as possible. But we as parents want to know that we're not alone and that what we're going through isn't crazy and abnormal. And it's not. We're in a fantastic community. We have amazing resources. Find a parent group with kids going through similar things. It's not about finding new best friends as parents. It's about finding other people that are going through what you're going through so that you know you're not alone. Child coping. If your child is involved in an unhealthy relationship, you want to always give them an exit, give them a way out. That's a pre-relationship conversation. Give them reasons to disconnect. Make rules about phones at dinner, at bedtime. Let them blame you. Change their environment. And if you're not sure how to have these conversations, go on a long car drive. And I'm hoping that my kids don't hear me right now because then they're going to know every time we go on a long car drive what I'm up to.
Yeah, mine is we do a puzzle. So that way
I love that.
we're in the same room, they're looking down and yeah, we can talk. Anyway.
Yeah, they have no idea. They have no idea.
Great.
And also, of course, the resources that we talked about. Definitely, let's normalize seeking really help from professionals in our community, and we have fantastic professionals in our community. I have no problem sharing our therapists. Our therapists are amazing. So if anybody wants their number, just reach out.
Awesome. Okay, well, here's one that I think a lot of parents can relate to. My child's friends all have more unrestricted access to social media or the internet than my children do. Any tips on how to navigate this? Of course, my teen can still gain access to these resources through their friends' phones.
This is so hard. This goes right into the whole idea that we can't protect them from everything. Warn them that if they do this, and they access something that they shouldn't, their friend could get into trouble. They could lose that friendship. And is it worth it? That's where we want to talk to them about that. Like it's that friendship is will be the consequence. So if they don't want to lose that friendship, and most kids don't, they love their friends, then it's something that they will think about very hard before going on to that next step.
Okay. So let's see, here's another one. Sort of a long question. I'll see if I can find a way to summarize. So if a friendship seems to be including some amount of coercion, just by the nature of human beings, being human beings, are there ways that a friend can push back and still maintain the friendship? Or is that a separate talk on healthy relationship boundaries, I guess? I feel like this is a common issue with middle school girls. Wouldn't want to recommend that girls abandon every friendship that has these elements, since often the girls are all figuring out how to interact. The person doing the coercing could be redirected as well. So any recommendations for our moms of middle school girls or dads?
So I'm tying this up to, I think it was the first question, same as above. If the behavior makes them uncomfortable, have them ask why. And this is where you can have the conversation about boundaries and what they're willing to put up with. If the answers that they're getting from the behavior doesn't make sense, help them to say that, and help them to recognize that the repetitive behavior of being ghosted, being left on red, or those are actual, that's what they say, left on red, right? When someone sends text messages and the other person doesn't reply at all, and it just shows that they read the text, but they're not replying, like that can be, if it happens frequently enough, that can be considered emotionally abusive, right? Because that person is kind of abandoning you in a moment. So if that's happening, then that's where it's no longer a healthy relationship. Does that answer the question? I feel like I'm missing something.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So I would just encourage anyone who has follow-up questions as your questions are being read to just put those in the chat directly to me or to the group. We have one more question, and then I can open it up if anybody wants to come off of mute and ask anything out loud, and I can stop the recording. So the last question here is just, you know, I think a lot of kids and maybe even parents feel like, you know, that don't talk to strangers online or you'll be taken is sort of an urban legend. And I guess, you know, because my kids don't know anybody who's ever taken as a result of an online relationship, right? Mm-hmm. And so I guess, you know, do you have any suggestions on how parents can debunk the urban legend without completely freaking our kids out?
Yes. Yeah, that's why I only placed one side on here that talked about trafficking, because it can go down a rabbit hole really quick. And we saw all of those conspiracy theories about trafficking. It's not what it looks like in the movies at all. And it develops from long-term unhealthy relationships, which is why it's so critical for us to be able to teach our youth and to know ourselves what an unhealthy relationship is. Because it does start out as someone having a conversation with you on Fortnite, and sending you things in the mail that they think that you'll like, and then saying, well, can you do a favor for me? And then that relationship starts to build, and that's where our child having strength in knowing what coercion is, knowing what that pushy, icky persuasion feeling feels like, so that they can identify it. Having the conversation about what an online predator might do to befriend is so important, because then your child can come to you and say, oh my gosh, like with my teens, this is going to sound awful, but we make jokes about it, because you can go onto Instagram and see all the sugar daddy, sugar mama posts, and we look at them and we're like, this is so obvious. Like, how do people not see this? That this is predatory behavior. But because of the work I do and having these conversations, they know that, and they know that we can have a conversation about it. It's empowering to them. It's empowering to them because they can look at that picture and say, oh my gosh, what a joke. This person actually believes that someone's going to believe them. Sadly, yes. Yes. So having these conversations empowers them. It can happen over Fortnite. It can happen through any of the Xbox chatting. It's not what it looks like on the movie Taken. So it's important to have that conversation. And like we saw, more than half of the recruitment happens online.
Yeah. Okay. Sobering, right? All right. So I did have one more moderated question come in, and then I'll remove the I'll stop recording. So the last question here is one more question about can you elaborate a little bit more on redirecting and how that can help? How do you do it, and who is it aimed at? And specifically, the question is, I guess you talked about redirecting as a tactic. Is it about putting the focus on the person doing the coercing and taking the pressure off the person being coerced? Is that the point of redirecting, or?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So redirecting is trying to change the behavior of the person that's doing the pushy persuasion. It's it's giving somebody the tools to have the conversations of, I'm not going to do that because, but it's a role for both parents and for peers to be part of the redirecting. There is a phenomenal TED Talk from a sports reporter who spent a lot of time in the locker rooms, and she talks about redirecting, and I'll share that link. She does a much better job than I do, but it takes practice for us to be able to have these tough conversations with the people in our lives that we know are possibly behaving in this way, right? Again, developmentally, right now for our youth, decision making is not such a great deal, is not such a great skill set for them. And we're learning. And like I was saying before, we all make mistakes. But when their behavior starts to become repetitive or aggressive, so if we see that, then we can have a conversation with that person like, hey, so do you recognize that what you're doing right now can be taken as abusive? Or, you know, I don't feel like you're being abusive right now, but someone else might take this as abusive. I just want to have that conversation with you. Like, or I think you're an amazing person, but when you say this, it kind of throws off the way that I think the point that you're trying to make. Always starting off with something positive. You have such a strong personality, and people listen to you. So when you do this, it makes it makes you look like you're being a bully. Does that help? So it's just a strategy to use, starting off with something positive and then working a way in to change the behavior.
Okay, great. All right, so I'm just going to, there were a couple other questions that were asked that were more general. I'm going to just address those and mention one more focus thing, and then I'll turn off the recording and we can just open the conversation to just have an open conversation. So a couple folks mentioned, you know, somebody mentioned this would be a great presentation for peers to conduct within the school. And another person mentioned, is there a presentation of this topic focused on younger children, say 8 years old or so? And I'll just address those two by saying we will share that feedback with our partners in district administration. Focus's lane is families and parents, and the school district and the wellness council and the behavioral health specialists, their lane is the students. And so we can just pass along, you know, this poll, the request that this kind of information be shared with other groups as well. Those are great suggestions. They're just sort of out of our lane. The only other thing I'll mention, just from a focus perspective, well, first of all, I want to take a minute and thank Deanna. We'll open the floor up and we'll have more conversation in a minute. But thank you so much for taking all your time to present tonight. We have another focus event coming up at the end of October. Someone's going to tell me the date because I'm going to get it wrong because I'm awful at dates. And that topic is about diversity and inclusion. It is a literature circle. And if you go to ucfsd.org/focus and you click on upcoming events, you'll see there's a list of books that you can choose from to read, and then join the literature circle and we'll have some conversation. So that is happening on October something, 20, it's a Tuesday, 9th, I think, 7th, 27th. Yes.
27th.
All right,
I think it's the 27th.
there we go. Okay, so I am going to turn off recording now, and then you guys can feel free to unmute yourselves. And bear with me 1 second. I'll do that.
Betty, I just wanted to reinforce to everyone. First, thank you so much. There's no way that I could have pulled this off alone. Focus is amazing. Thank you, Dr. Sandoval, for the support.